Kamala Harris, she is obviously, she's running for president for 2020. And she was, if I remember correctly, she was one of the first people to declare too. At least one of the more well-known ones that declared. And apparently she isn't doing too well lately as far as the amount of attention that she was getting initially, as far as the hype that she was kind of getting and the crowds that she was attracting and stuff. Apparently that's kind of fizzled out a little bit. So this is an article from the LA Times from May 31st. It says, after dazzling debut, Kamala Harris falls from the top of presidential pack. It says, when Kamala Harris launched her presidential bid 4 months ago, the stars all seemed to be aligned. She drew a crowd of roughly 20,000 to a lavish Oakland rally. She raised $1.5 million in just 24 hours. She boasted a string of endorsements from California politicians. But as she returns to the Bay Area this weekend for the annual state Democratic Party convention, along with 13 other candidates eager to fight on her home turf, Harris no longer dazzles quite so much. Rather, there is a prevalent sense that for all her seeming potential, California's charismatic U.S. senator has fallen short of expectations. The disappointment, observers say, stems in part from Harris's failure to present a compelling case for her candidacy beyond her background as a prosecutor, her buoyant personality, and a deep contempt shared by others in contest for President Trump. Quote, "You don't get elected because you're a list of qualities," said Gil Duran, a former Harris advisor, who is now the opinion editor of the Sacramento Bee. What's the big idea she's carrying? That's what she's trying to figure out. She's having trouble figuring out what she represents. Other candidates have forged past Harris. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, both well-defined personalities, have staked their place as frontrunners in the crowded contest. Upstart Pete Buttigieg, the brainy young mayor of South Bend, Indiana, has garnered buzz and big bucks from some of California's major political donors. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has won praise for her soup-to-nuts sheaf of liberal policy proposals. Backers say Harris's slow and steady approach is the right one for this early stage of the campaign, arguing that consistency on the trail fundraising matter more than in catchy sound bites or viral moments. It says, I don't think anyone ever thought she would get in the race and blow away the field and be a frontrunner from January 2019 through Election Day, said Brian Brokaw, who managed Harris's 2 successful runs for state attorney general. She needs to stay in the upper tier, which I think she is. Stay in striking position, and you outlast everybody. Harris's 2016 election to the Senate coincided with Trump's unexpected victory, and she arrived in Washington as a fierce adversary of the polarizing president. Her pugnacious grilling of Attorney Generals Jeff Sessions and William Barr, among others, thrilled fellow Democrats. But she has largely failed to replicate those compelling performances while campaigning. Instead, her equivocations have often overshadowed efforts to excite partisan passions. In one of her first national campaign appearances at a CNN town hall, she offhandedly backed eliminating the country's private health insurance system. Months later, she is still trying to explain her position. And in parentheses, it says she said that her support for Medicare for All meant eliminating healthcare bureaucracy, not doing away with private insurance. During another televised town hall, Harris said she was open to a conversation about letting incarcerated violent felons vote, only to state the next day she would not support that right for the most serious offenders. That was a position that Bernie Sanders took. It says, after touting her Get Tough initiative on child truancy throughout much of her career, a centerpiece of her focus on protecting youth, she recently pulled back, saying she regretted the unintended consequence that some parents went to jail. See, again, it's like you just noticed that? I mean, you just noticed how bad it was? Why couldn't you notice this like 2 years ago? Or like before you were running, you know? She probably knew that she could get away with it because nobody would call her out. And since she would probably win so easily in California. It says the hedging revived one of the criticisms that has followed Harris throughout her public life. This is the suggestion that she is politically timid and overly cautious. As Attorney General, she was notably muted on some of the state's most fraught issues, such as police use of force and ballot initiatives to change California's sentencing laws. That tension has spilled into her presidential campaign, where some aides advocate a more assertively progressive stance to court left-leaning activists, while others prefer that Harris hug the middle to better position herself for a general election. The candidate herself is ambivalent, said one strategist familiar with the campaign's internal dynamic, who described part of the conflict as Kamala versus Kamala. David Axelrod, who twice helped navigate Barack Obama to the White House, said that caution, quote, can be a very, very perilous thing in a presidential campaign, where that can often translate into exceedingly political and calculated. Yeah, no kidding. Here we go. It says defenders who see sexism at play say Harris's perceived skittishness was a result of competing pressures. Conservative law enforcement officials on one side were naturally suspicious of a mixed-race woman from San Francisco and left-leaning criminal justice reform advocates on the other. They note that she was an early and ardent advocate of impeaching Trump, leaping out in front of many rivals. The whole cautious thing, it makes me bristle a little bit, said Brokaw, who remains an informal Harris advisor. I honestly think that is one of her biggest strengths. She is a prosecutor who spent years in legal settings where every word matters, where you can blow a case with one misspeak. You're never going to change that about her. Well, that's the problem. That's what makes her not a very good option. And when it comes to, like, what does it say? She says, being cautious. Okay, if you're so cautious, then why are you advocating for child truancy so much? You know, why are you advocating for, such as, so being muted on police use of force and ballot initiatives to change California's sentencing laws. So you're very stubborn about not defending those things. Or I'm sorry, not changing your position on those things. But, now all of a sudden it's sexist if you call her out for those things. Well, not all of a sudden, it's always been like that since the days of Hillary Clinton, which was not that long ago, obviously, and still to this day. It says, but standing in a courtroom before judge and jury is different than persuading Democratic primary voters, especially when there are nearly 24 other candidates also making their arguments. She's a brilliant person. There's no doubt about that, Axelrod said. But what we've learned so far is that she's great at asking questions, but timid at answering them. She's going to have to correct that to navigate this process. Of course, fortunes can change quickly, particularly with more than 8 months until the first votes are cast. It says polling gives Harris high favorability marks and shows voters are curious to learn more about her. She continues to draw strong turnout in early primary states, and her crisp performance in an MSNBC town hall Tuesday night drew 2.2 million viewers, the second highest rated televised candidate forum so far. Harris will share a spotlight this weekend with many of her rivals as a parade of presidential hopefuls take their turns addressing Democratic activists in downtown San Francisco. One conspicuous exception is Biden, who will be campaigning in Ohio. The rest of the article just talks about people that are going to be at the California Democratic Convention, about how her chances in California, millions of voters that are going to be deciding the fate of, I guess, whoever ends up winning. Hopefully it's not her. So yeah, when it comes to Kamala Harris, I obviously have never, not obviously, maybe it's not that obvious, but I've never been a fan. I understand her appeal when you think of it in the kind of the prism and the kind of the mentality of a typical kind of Democratic loyalist voter. A lot of them are just gonna be like, well, she's black, and to be fair, she's actually half Indian, half Jamaican. But she's a person of color. She's a woman of color. She's goes after Trump. She's really independent and strong. She's a prosecutor, so that's really good. Her she smiles a lot, and she's, what was another one, pugnacious or something, buoyant. So I mean, it's all these, like, everything is all the stuff about her that they try and push. Everything revolves around, like, this mentality of she's really, like, it's her personality. She's really, like, nice, and she's really smiley, and she's very exuberant, and she's outspoken, and she likes to say a lot of things that show her to be, she's strong. And it's like, is anything about policy? Not one single thing was mentioned about policy here. The only thing that I can think of is her views on, like, truancy and stuff, and, like, Medicare for all and stuff. But, like, it doesn't talk about, like, what she's in favor of, though. It just says what she's, like, against. So, like, I'm not against, I'm not in favor of Medicare for all because I don't want to get rid of, private insurance. I'm not in favor of, what was the other thing? Not in favor of letting people that are in jail, so criminals that are in jail, to vote. So, like, what are you for? You're just saying everything that you're against, So this is how Kamala Harris is. She's, and they're portraying her as, like, this, she's very careful, and she's very cautious, and overly cautious, and timid and stuff. Like, that's not a good thing, and it has nothing to do with sexism. There's a lot of, how many cautious male candidates? President Obama was very cautious. Now, when he was campaigning, he was actually a firebrand. I was watching a video recently from Obama, because, a lot of people, I know I compared her to him, because, it's like this whole idea of, like, giving good speeches and saying good things, but not actually acting on them. That's what Obama was. And it seems like Kamala Harris is the same way. But there was a video of Barack Obama in one of the debates with Hillary Clinton, between him and Hillary Clinton. Maybe there was one other person. It was John Edwards or something. But him and Hillary were going at it. They were butting heads, and it was showing him he was calling Hillary out for being a corporate lawyer for Walmart, sitting on the board of Walmart. And she, looking at him the whole time like, damn, what am I going to say? How am I going to respond to this? So, Obama was always very good in the campaigns when he was rightfully calling out the corruption of Hillary Clinton and the opportunism of Hillary Clinton. So it's interesting that now, they're talking about Kamala Harris, and it's like, oh, well, if you're criticizing her, you're sexist, because you're criticizing her for being timid and cautious and stuff. But like I said, Barack Obama. So when Barack Obama became president, he was very, very cautious. Every little thing Obama worried about, saying that because he didn't want to offend anybody. And then when he did say something that offended somebody, for example, when he referred to, I think he referred to the police that there were police that they arrested a black professor that was trying to enter his own home. This was early in his presidency, it was in 2009 if I remember correctly. He was trying to go into his own home, and police arrested the poor guy. I think he had, like, been locked out or something, so he had to, like, try and break in somehow. And they pretty much arrested him, and yeah, even though there was no evidence of him actually, there was no evidence of him not living there. He had lived there, or he was living there, and that was, I guess, to observers that knew he lived there, they knew that he lived there. So so what Obama did is, when he gave a statement on what happened, and this was a man that he knew, and he ended up saying that the cops acted stupidly or idiotically or something. There you go. Henry Louis Gates. That was the name of the professor. Yeah. So he was a Harvard University professor, and he was arrested at his Cambridge, Massachusetts home, because somebody called 911, and then they, because he was trying to break and enter into a home. So they thought this guy, because he's a black guy, I guarantee if it was a white guy, they wouldn't have said the same thing. Because he was a black man, I guarantee they ended up, whoever reported him ended up thinking he's, breaking into this home. So, but after that, yeah, he, So like that was like the only controversial statement that, like, I would say one of the only controversial statements that Barack Obama ever made during his presidency, where he said something like he was speaking his mind and he said something and then got in trouble for it, and then he decided to apologize because he didn't want to offend anybody. So, but outside of that and maybe a couple of other examples, Barack Obama was an extremely cautious speaker, extremely cautious, in his decision making, extremely, cautious in offending Republicans and saying the right things so that he could get their votes, even though he never did, and they obstructed and, repealed all of his, or tried to repeal all of his policies that he pushed for or put into law. It's Obamacare being the best example, Dodd-Frank and whatnot. So, yeah, but I mean, being overly cautious is not a good quality. That's a terrible quality. That's not a quality that majority of politicians should have. So when you talk about Kamala Harris being timid and being overly cautious, that's not something that's going to go up good. I mean, how's that? Can you imagine her going up against Donald Trump? Donald Trump is going to he's going to run over like a Mack truck. She's going to just be standing there being cautious and timid the whole time. Now, maybe she will ask really good prosecutorial questions and press him on things, but that doesn't mean that she's not going to be able to handle his onslaught of things that he's going to say, which he's going to do it, big time for sure, and because that's how Trump operates. And he's going to try and bully her, and she's not going to have much of a response. And Hillary Clinton couldn't really could really take his kind of his attacks on her either when they were in debates and stuff, because he would bombard her with attacks as well. And she did too, to some extent. But Trump can handle those kind of people very, very easily. I think the only person outside of Bernie Sanders that would be able to handle Trump in a debate would be Joe Biden, ironically, because Joe Biden is actually a pretty good debater. And he took on people like Sarah Palin. He took on people like Paul Ryan in VP debates. So he did well in those. So when he was Obama's VP. So, but yeah, Kamala Harris is not somebody I don't see her being a very promising candidate unless she does manage to separate herself from the other candidates. I thought she was just going to be, very popular based on the fact that she is a woman of color and, getting all these views when she appears on MSNBC and stuff, getting people to watch in and tune in, raising a ton of money, which broke Bernie Sanders' record, which then he broke after that. So, Kamala Harris ended up breaking Bernie's 24-hour campaigning record from donor money. She raised $1.5 million, which beat Bernie's, I think, 1.2 or 1.4 or something. But then Bernie ended up beating that by getting 5.9 million. So, but yeah, he had held the record in 2016, which she beat. So yeah, but I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't think she's completely out of it. I don't think she's going to drop out at any point, obviously, because she's not doing that bad. But, I mean, she's kind of having the same issues as Beto O'Rourke in the sense that she can't, and she's not worse than Beto O'Rourke. Beto is really bad. But she's having the same problems as far as, like, kind of identifying herself and, as, like, this particular type of candidate and kind of, like, getting people to recognize her as, like, somebody that stands for certain policies and certain things. She can't differentiate herself from any kind of Democrat, while people like Bernie, Biden, it even seems like Buttigieg and stuff, like they're kind of candidates that they're able to stand out from the crowd. Kamala Harris can't do that. Beto O'Rourke can't do that. And it doesn't seem like a lot of candidates honestly are going to do that, because there's so many of them, and like they said, there's so many candidates running. It's like you have so many options. You're going to get distracted by so many of them from left to right. It's going to be hard to keep track. But the ones that are well known, that have the name recognition and have good policies, those ones are definitely going to stand out the most for sure. So, and I don't think Kamala Harris is going to be able to do that.